Good afternoon. Welcome to the second Oriented Innovation Series session for calendar year 2014. It's our first one where our presenters are located in this room or even anywhere in North Carolina. So we're going to see how this technology works. This should be good. Again, I'm Milazzo. I'm the Executive Director of an organization called the Regional Transportation Alliance here in the Triangle area. And we have launched something called the RTA Transit Innovation Series to try to help facilitate conversations on it in Wake County and regional transit conversations as well. At this time, partner sponsors for making the series possible. We want Kinley Associates, Triangle, and you all. Just give them a round of applause for that. The RTA leadership team. They help ensure that the regional group for transportation issues in the Triangle continues to focus on moving the region forward. Those organizations include founding member chambers of Cary, Chapel Harborough, Greater Durham, and Greater Raleigh. Our energy, our goal, the education, Fairwind, Forges, Greater Raleigh, Line, Quincy, Legal Park, Regardless of North Carolina, shared partners, Credit Suisse, Fidelity Investments, or IBM, and our partners from the other sites, turn cameras on mute just temporarily. NetApp, Red Hat, and our capital area MPO, capital city Raleigh, Durham Chevrolet MPO, Raleigh Authority, and Transit. And of course, our chambers, who are throughout the 10 counties of central and eastern North Carolina. At this time, I have our chairman, Ed Paradise, with Cisco Systems, to do some introductions for the event. And so, Systems is also making this event possible for Cisco WebEx technology. Lead us on.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to introduce our two distinguished speakers. And, let me get started with that. Could you hear me okay in the room? It sounds like a bit of an echo, Joe. I'm going to just use the room here in front of the camera if that's not going out. Well, so let me first start with Stephanie Lotshaw. She joined the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, IDTDP, in March of 2010 to work on special projects. A critical role in developing the BRT standard over the past few years, as well as IDTP's report on movement for your transit dollar, and this is of 21 North American transit corridors. Both MS in International Development Economics from the School of Oriental and African Studies, and a bachelor's degree in Latin American from Colorado College. Professor David Levinson serves on the faculty of the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Minnesota, and the Networks, Economics, and Urban Systems Research Group. Richard P. Crone, CS Chair in Transportation, and edited several books, including The Transportation Experience and numerous peer-reviewed articles. He is the Journal of Transportation and Land Use, and he blogs at transportationist.org. Maybe we'll get that up on the screen for you later if it's clear. But and thank both of the speakers and turn pass the ball over to Stephanie so that we could pick up and start her presentation. So thank you, Stephanie and David.
So do you want to transfer me? So my name is Stephanie Lotshaw. I'm a program manager at the Institute for Transportation Development Policy. I work in the U.S. field office, which is in New York, but we work all across the U.S. and we work in Africa. So a little IP. IP is a nonprofit. We've worked since we were in 1985. We work with cities wide to implement sustainable transport solutions, and most of our work over the past few decades has been focused on BRT. Also, we do pedestrianization projects and bike projects as well. So IT has worked on BRT systems all over the world. We've worked in Argentina, Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Mexico, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, and the United States. We originally started working in developing countries, but over the past 2 or 3 years, we started in the U.S. And right now we're working in Chicago, in San Francisco, and we've advised Nashville and Pittsburgh on the BRT corridors. So what is BRT? With defining BRT. BRT is a high-quality bus-based transit system that delivers fast, comfortable, cost-effective urban mobility through the provision of segregated right-of-way infrastructure, rapid and frequent operations, and excellent marketing and service.
Stephanie.
Yeah.
Stephanie, can you share your screen because we're not seeing your presentation.
Sorry.
I just want to make sure you're doing that.
Sorry about that.
That's right.
So about ITDP, where we work, and when YBRT. So this is we mission that is fairly comprehensive because we feel that it really defines how we approach BRT in our work. Curitiba implemented the first BRT system, which opened in 1974. We knew that it needed to implement a system and was initially actually thinking about rail. However, the cost was so prohibitive for the city that it quickly had to look through other options. City's then mayor, Jamie Lerner, thought up a bus-based system that had all the features rail, like dedicated lanes, upward fare collection, level boarding, all of the made rail so fast and convenient, but which was cheaper and was using the existing roadway infrastructure that they had. So the eventual system cost a fraction of the proposed system, provide the same high quality of service, and so more expensive than what they would have spent on a rail system. After Curitiba opened the first system in 1974, there was a growth in BRT all over the world, mostly in Latin America, though. Other ones had they opened systems with Curitiba at lower speeds, capacities, lower customer comfort. These light BRT systems passengers were less appreciated by the general public, and they tarnished a little bit the BRT brand. In 1998, those BRT opened, and there was the second wave of high-quality BRT corridors, the model of which is the Milazzo system in Bogota. Milazzo became the first quality high-capacity BRT system in the world. It featured fully segregated median-aligned busways, It features gate-controlled off-board fare collection, platform-level boarding, safe and comfortable stations. It offered fast and reliable one-seat service for most of their passengers, in addition to providing a really unique and distinct brand that people saw Transmillennium as something that helped define their city. We saw a huge increase in the RTA all across Latin America, and that eventually spread all over the world, specifically to the United States and to Europe. The absence of agreement among a lot of planners and engineers about what the basic elements of BRT are, what a system has to be called BRT. That for every new BRT corridor that was world class, like Transmillennium and like Curitiba, there were open that were labeled BRT that were not, and this confusion about BRT and what benefits it could actually provide. So, since many systems have chosen BRT because of its ease of implementation, both in terms of cost and time of implementation, compared to something like a rail corridor, and its ability to provide affordable services, specific availability to go in and off corridor. Show you this initially and then describe it in a second. So, tailored to fit the needs and the demand of a corridor. For example, in Chicago along Ashland right now, the city has chosen to implement full BRT treatment for only 5 miles of a 26-mile corridor, wanting a one-seat ride for passengers that are going further than those 5 miles. They chose the 5 miles because demand is most concentrated in this area, and it's the greatest delay. So implementing time-reducing, fast-reducing elements are most beneficial in that area to the whole corridor. Along the rest of Ashland will benefit the system eventually, but only as demand grows. See with this diagram, the top it's what we call trunk and tier services, where the infrastructure runs between essentially 2 points, and there are transfer terminals that then take passengers other places. Kind of puts a high burden on passengers. It sometimes makes them pay double fares. The bottom, when you see complementary services, the different lines can both go on and off corridor without the need for a transfer. And this is one of the benefits of BRT. So because it's a bus-based system and it operates on road, it can just, whereas if you have a corridor off of the track. So it provides a better one-seat ride in a lot of. In the early days of BRT, there wasn't a common idea of BRT. In 2012, the first version of the BRT standard was introduced, and in 2013, the first official version was released. Standard was created because, unlike for rail-based mass transit system, there hasn't been a common understanding of precisely what constitutes BRT. As I mentioned before, this has caused a lot of confusion about what it is and what benefits it can provide. This quality control has made it possible for original bus system improvements to be branded as BRT, which leads to confusion and backlash about the concept. And these modest improvements are beneficial to bus riders. They're often not the most cost-effective solution or time-efficient solution, and they don't add up to the fundamental change needed to shift this travel paradigm. So, silver and gold, or basic BRT, sets a standard for what is and what is best practice in BRT. In the BRT standard, they result in consistently improved system performance and generally have a positive impact on ridership. So you can see here there are 6 BRT point categories: basic, the BRT basic, service planning, infrastructure, station design and station bus interface, service and passenger information systems, and integration and access. The maximum points that you can get to standard is 100, and the basics total to 33, but there is a minimum needed of 18. So there are 4 categories of of T. There's gold, silver, bronze, and basic. This is a gold corridor. It's in Guangzhou, China. Gold standard BRT is consistent with all of the elements that are most of the elements that are laid out in the BRT standard. It's achievable on any corridor with sufficient demand to justify BRT treatment, but it might cost a little more to achieve. However, these systems, like here in Guangzhou and Transmilenio and Bogota, have the ability to really inspire other cities to transform their travel patterns. And the Health Line and Silver Standard BRT, the only silver standard in the U.S., includes most of the elements of best practice in the BRT standard, and it is more cost-effective than gold BRT. And finally, we have Bronze Standard BRT. This is Cape Town's My City, and it meets all of the basics of the BRT standard, and it has some additional characteristics like segregated bike lanes and increased pedestrian safety, elevated above basic BRT. And basic BRT is, if you've ever seen the Pittsburgh South and West ways, they have dedicated lanes, they have priority. We don't have any of the additional elements that elevate it for a higher quality of service. As I just said, there are 17 BRT corridors in the U.S. The Pittsburgh Martin Luther King Busway, there's Vegas Strip and Downtown Express, the Orange Line BRT, the Emerald Express Green Line, and Health Line BRT, which is silver. Standard creates a minimum definition. This is what can identify as the basics of BRT, the things that are going to give you the best time improvement, and they're going to be of the most benefit to riders. There are upward fare collection, intersection treatment, and platform level boarding. A whole committee that created the BRT standard felt that these elements were essential for calling a corridor BRT, and they really affected the travel times and comfort of passengers. So, BRT basic is busway alignment. See here, this is Curitiba, Brazil. 2 points on busway alignment to really have a segregated right away for your buses. This alignment minimizes conflict with other traffic, especially turning movements from the traffic lanes, and this of the roadway encounters much fewer with curb, deliveries, etc. This is you can see it median lines. Is dedicated right-of-way. Dedicated right-of-ways are really a very crucial element to BRT. They're essential in ensuring that buses can move quickly and unimpeded by congestion, and you can enforce these dedicated zones in various ways. As you can see here in Jakarta, there's actually delineators that prevent cars from moving into the bus lane. You can also use colorized pavement like they do here in Las Vegas and here in town, but Cape Town also has a fully segregated right-of-way. The off-board fare collection, it really is one of the most critical factors in reducing travel time. There are 2 basic approaches to off-board fare collection. It's very controlled, which you can see in Cisco City and here in Lima, or proof of payment, where passengers pay at a kiosk, they collect a ticket, and checked by an inspector. This is used in Cleveland. The 4th is intersection treatments. There are a bunch of ways to increase bus speeds at intersections, all of which are primarily aimed at increasing the green signal time at intersections. Turns, however, and minimizing the number of traffic signals is the most effective at maximizing the green signal time for buses, and it significantly reduces overall travel time. Platform level boarding. Platform level boarding reduces the lighting times for passenger, but more importantly, it also is more comfortable for passengers. They don't have to walk up steps. People with strollers, that are carrying groceries, elderly, it really makes the whole experience much more comfortable for passengers. There are a lot of elements that elevate the quality of a corridor that are really important when you're considering building RT. Is frequency of service. People will transit regardless of the mode if it's convenient, comfortable, and takes them where they want to go. So if it doesn't have these features, then no matter what kind of mode it is, the people are less likely to take it. You see here in Guangzhou, the ridership on the system is around 800,000 per day. The frequency of about 300 buses an hour. That's very unique and only really applicable to China. This has generated such a high ridership because people take it at any time of the day. They can go anywhere they want to go in the city, and it doesn't cost them more. It doesn't take them more time, and that's really important. Another critical element is having infrastructure in the downtown. Like I said before, with frequency, it's ensuring where people want to go, and frequently that their highest ridership is. In Mexico City, this is old Mexico City, and they recently implemented a BRT downtown, and it has not only increased ridership on the rest of the corridor, they have a total of 4 lines in Mexico City, and they just opened their 5th, but it's also improved safety in the center city. It's improved, and it's really transformed the pedestrian environment, which was really crowded and Another for BRT is center stations. Like when I talked about with complement services versus trunk and feeder, these are stations allow for passengers to have a one-seat ride or to easily transfer between different lines without having to incur for penalties or waiting a long time. Real time, we really like to know when buses are going to come, how long they have to wait. So that's a big in terms of generating higher ridership. So infrastructure, infrastructure, really improves customer access. It provides a full set of sustainable travel options, and it enhances road safety. So it makes people want to walk to the BRT, ride their bikes to the BRT, and sees frequency transit as a viable option. So ITDP has also recently gotten looking at the land development around transit. We recently released a study called More Development for Your Transit Dollar. It's an analysis of 21 North American transit corridors. We looked at 13 cities across the U.S., and we looked at BRT, LRT, and streetcar. Internationally have been instrumental in stimulating development. This has been seen in Curitiba, it's been seen in Bogotá. Curitiba is probably the most famous example. It's a wedding cake, the traditional wedding cake where you have most of your density around the transit corridor, and then you have a lower density outside of the transit corridor. And you can see here all of the density is really downtown. And the transit really helps. So this BRT is a fairly new concept. Definition of BRT has started to help people realize what is and what is not true BRT. And so this report, we looked at true BRT corridors because a lot of BRT corridors that have been previously been studied have been shown to not been able to stimulate any kinds of development. But what is BRT is actually BRT, and therefore we can't really use that as a point of comparison. So we looked at BRT and streetcar corridors across the U.S. We looked at several factors that affect development, and we we were able to take all of those 3 different modes and use a quality baseline, and for that we use the BRT standard. Able to score LRTs and streetcars the BRT standard because, as it turns out, high quality BRT and LRT have many of the same characteristics. So here's 13 of the 13 cities. And then total TOD investment by corridor. And we, in fact, BRT has been able to stimulate development. At how and why they've been able to stimulate development, we looked at several main factors. Their quality of transit, the strength of the land market, the level of government support, age of systems, system length, and ridership. First 3 emerged as those that have the most influence on land development, and the last 3 didn't have a significant on land development, so we left them out of the main analysis. So the land analogy we took from the Center for Transit-Oriented Development, where they classify existing land market strengths into 3 different types. First is limited. Limited land markets are where the transit passes predominantly through land that is not easily developed, either because it's already developed, institutional land that isn't available, is adjacent to a highway or an SW line, like you see here in Denver, Colorado. Topography sometimes is too difficult to be developed, like if the line runs through a hilly area that's not able to be developed. It could be that the land is divided into small parcels with confusing title deeds. You can have land or the land is blighted. There are different reasons why classified as limited. These government interventions can help stimulate development in these kinds of corridors, but it's likely to be extremely resource intensive. So the second is emerging. Typically, land markets in which the transit passes through areas where land is available for redevelopment, but the sector of the area might be blighted, like as you see here in Cleveland, with a lot of vacant properties or buildings. However, this kind of area is usually adjacent to an economic anchor and therefore is likely to redevelop with some or a government intervention. Probably not going to intensify it on its own near term, but some government support could have a real transformative effect. Land typology is strong. Land markets that are in the strong category tend to be in or adjacent to downtowns where land is available for development and where unnatural or historical features like waterfronts or historical buildings make the land really attractive to developers. Some governments could help for further development, but they're probably already happening on their own. Here, in these kind of land markets, planning authorities will have more leverage to improve ability and other transit-oriented qualities of development. So intensive kinds of interventions are less necessary. So in the land market typology, we looked at government support. There are different government interventions that can help promote development on a parcel of land adjacent to a transit intervention. Interventions can involve regulations, such as changing zone parking or government investments into new infrastructure, new sewer power lines, affordable loans, HIP areas, tax abatements, even government starting to assemble land is really great intervention. So for these, we took each core and we classified what the government had done along them. And what we found was that, as you saw in the initial list of TOD, was that BRT and LRT can leverage many times TOD than they cost. So that was a very critical reason that we found that BRT is actually able to search development. And then our transit investment for corridors that are similar quality, it actually does leverage more TOD investment in LRT or streetcars. The predictor of success in terms of which factors have the most effect on development development was first government support for cities, so zoning, financial support. Then really there was less strength, so was support and limited emerged strong. And then thirdly was the quality of the transit investment. The key lesson was that coordinated government action is key. Whatever kind of corridor you're going to implement, there needs to be coordination among transit, planning, parks, and projects to really focus an area and put all the effort you can in an area. Yeah, I'm going a little bit over, but I'm briefly going to go into Cleveland. Cleveland was one of our case studies in more development of your transit dollar, and we really identified them as a best practice because the RTA corridor has helped leverage over $5.8 billion in new development. That connected to anchors, the University Circle area that has the Cleveland Clinic, and then downtown Cleveland. They put into a high-quality transit mode, their BRT is Silver Standard, and then they also invested about $150 million in buried power lines, new water and sewer, new sidewalks, new street furniture. They really beautified the area to help push visitors to want to be along that corridor. Also made significant changes. They changed a formerly commercial area into something that's mixed use. They really encouraged street-level activity. They encouraged residential. They reduced park minimums. They really an active and also flexible area. They also put money into it. The Economic Development Department in Cleveland has really pushed a lot of kind of what they're giving to developers. So it has really contributed to their success. They use a number of different programs that you can see here. They worked really well with developers. There was a lot on giving them financing. They really worked with them on plans. They helped them push it through the planning department. They worked in partnership with a lot of these developers to give them confidence that this is not going to a barrier after it had somewhat developed. That's it for me. I'll hear for questions after, and I hope informative.
David?
Sorry to share my application. You see? There we go. Almost.
Can you make?
Try it, though.
Okay. I gave.
You just do it. Okay. Good deal.
Mary sound, if you can.
Can you hear?
Dave. Presentation.
All right. Keynote.
Looks good.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
So Joe asked me to talk about accessibility, streetcars, and bus rapid transit. So what do we do? We want transit to provide accessibility. So accessibility people to reach things they care about. We want people to be able to reach more things, such as jobs, opportunities. If your employer would be able to reach workers in less time. Any reason to locate anywhere in particular is because we want to possess some sort of resources. So we own a mine because we want to, and a piece of land that's a mine because we want to be able to extract resources. Or we want to be able to utilize the dirt in order to grow something. Or to be near something, be far from something. Now, we must own farms or mines. Okay, say that it isn't possible to farm in a city, but that's not generally considered the highest and best use. So what we would care about in metropolitan areas is for the value of land is how many things you can reach. And it's been understood that the value of land depends on how far you are from other things. Now, distance to the hall in New York City in the 1800s and the rent gradient, the price per square foot, depending on how far away you are from the city hall in New York. Right. That's obviously creating value, and by looking at the price of land. Okay. Price per area, price per meter squared, depends on accessibility, the quality of the structure, quality of land, and low days. And these themselves depend on the price. You're not going to build a very expensive building in a place where the land doesn't justify that. We determine this value through what are called Hedonic models. So we how much each additional value unit of access is worth. For instance, in the Twin Cities, years ago, we found that each additional job within 20 minutes at 25 cents the price of a single-family home. Sound like much, but the average single-family home can reach hundreds of thousands of jobs. So you're multiplying that 25 cents times several hundred thousand jobs to determine the price of a single-family home. So there's a side of accessible urban development. The previous speaker talked about the virtuous circle, and we want to be able to stimulate this virtuous circle. This graph right here, the idea on the left side that as we increase transit accessibility, we're going to improve transit demand, and as we increase transit demand, we're going to have more revenue for transit, which will add to transit capacity, and that increase the accessibility. That's a virtuous circle. Actually, will also induce development, and it will increase the value of land, and that value of land can be used to pay for that transit capacity. Now, that can either be the way done, where a private entrepreneur would go and take development they owned and use that to stimulate construction of streetcars in their own community. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Or which is taxing that development in part to pay for public infrastructure. This happens on the highway side. It's complicated because we worry about highway congestion, and highway can slows down speed and decreases highway accessibility. But the same process works on both roads. Now, this talk is going to focus on the trade. So we say use the interdependent shapers of urban form, and look at the transit side of things. We have a couple of and look at the first deployments of some of the first deployments of transit. I don't hesitate to say the first, but Omnibus service, from which we get our bus, was deployed in 1829. Now you can see it was pulled by horses, ran major streets, passengers on and off. Tell the driver that if they wanted to get off the bus, they'd cord that was attached to the shoulder. Now, if you're slightly, you might know that you still pull cords, in this case, ring a bell to let the driver know that you want to get. So some technologies go back a long way and have only been somewhat modestly. So round trip daily, nothing like the frequency we want to see in a gold standard BRT, but it was a bus service, carried 24 passengers, quite pricey. Now, well, in the city of London, was growing very quickly. The city, 50,000 people in a 1 square mile. It was a very dead area. And it was two railroads that were being constructed from the 1830s on through the 1850s, and in order to keep the railways out of the central, was proposed an underground system. And a short movie are the densities of residential development, railway, of the underground railway system. You can see this through over decades. As railroads, this underground systems inducing development, or development attracting the underground system. Okay. Both these can occur because we had a positive feedback system. London first got it connected to railways in 1836, and by 1886 there was a Royal Commission on Railway Termini established to determine where the stations would be. They did a Union Station in London, and they had something like 17 different stations, because they're only built by separate companies that wanted as close as possible to the center and reach into the outskirts of England. The Metropolitan in 1854, opened in 1863, was closed in 1884. Now you can cover systems. You took a road, you dug a ditch in the road, you laid down some railroad track, you put a bridge over the road, and then you put a road on top of it. And well, until you want to have crossings, and you want to cross underground at the same grade, so you build deeper. Now, to build deeper requires tunneling technology, and that wasn't really available until 1890 when the city in South London railway was open, which is now part of the Northern Line. And employees, which were all privately developed in the 1860s with general approval, parliamentary approval, permitted to be developers except for the Metropolitan Railway, which developed the suburbs of London, an area that's been referred to as Metroland. All this basically came to a halt around World War II, and a green belt was built around, was established in London, preventing further development in the areas immediately around London. Subsequently jumped past that. Economic development that this have two different areas. We call the periphery, which are the outer boroughs of London, and the core, which are the inner 7 boroughs of London. Because I think 1% increase in rail service to that borough due to population density, and what is it in population density due to rail construction? And it turns out that positive elasticity periphery, so that additional rail is going to increase the population density. So it's spur development. Increase in population density is going to attract rail, and we did this by looking at leads and legs and looking, what happened or how does that influence today? So we could try to establish structure here. But in the core, rail is population density. Why does it decrease population density? Well, it's because it's increasing jobs. Basically, a substitute. Real estate can be either used for residences or it can be employment, and if it's going to be used for employment, it's going to be used for fewer residences. That historically, rail system connected outside, but then the underground system connected the terminal of that system and then spread upward. In fact, for residences, okay, so solution is not a product of mobile. It first came about with the 1800s, which lowered density in the center, but and increased it in the suburbs, while it was increasing the employment density in the center. There's a lot going on as well. So we have done, that is, the rail is causing suburban residential development, and that proceeds and is positively and statistically related to. And the development is attracting railroad investments. We're intending rail infrastructure, and again, we can do this over time. So this induced supply is happening. So we have a positive feedback system. And the youth developed systems, subway systems in Boston and New York, built in a few cities. We spent our transportation capital in the late 1800s and the early 1900s on streetcars. Is a good example. I live in Minneapolis, so I like this example. This is what streetcar network looked like in 1900. Each dot is a single family home. Those were built by a private company that was also a land developer, and they were streetcars. It opened up area for real estate development. You can see how it evolved to 1910 and 1930. So, Twin Region, we found that with the exception of the streetcar lines outside of downtown, it was being residential development. Okay, so residential development wasn't attracting streetcars. The streetcars were causing the residential development. So, we have a streetcar network, very much of a streetcar network today in most U.S. cities. Looking at putting streetcars back in, and so I wrote a post on a blog called "Logic of Streetcars: The Logic of Buses," which got a lot of attention. And there's this debate about what streetcars do that buses can't. Why should we be building streetcar systems in cities instead of in buses, building rapid transit systems or improving bus operations in other ways? Simplified to light rail, the difference between streetcars and rail is of how you're running them. They're the same technology. Light rail vehicles tend to be a little bit lighter, but streetcar running in streets with traffic, light rail tends to run on short right-of-way. Now, these streetcars that are claimed they're electrified, so that they might have lower energy operating costs and lower emissions. Might be different, so they might have less labor per passenger. It's claimed to ride. They don't require pavement, in contrast with which do require pavement. It's said. There's and there's this claim that there's that there'll be more buses. People don't believe that buses will be permanent, but developers know that streetcars will, and so they'll make a commitment. So these are claims that streetcar apps have been making. So I'm going to talk about these sequence. So the lower energy operating costs and lower emissions. And yeah, they'll use a little bit less energy than diesel. They have lower emissions than diesel buses. Now, buses don't have to be diesel powered or electric buses in a number of U.S. cities. Took from an overhead wire, trolley buses, others, well as hybrid electric vehicles. They're expensive for numbers among them. They have two power plants. But how clean is the electricity serving the streetcar? Now, the electric grid is going to be getting cleaner over time. Right now, it's not terribly clean. So depending on where you are, it may or may not produce emissions that are lower than this. So this is a weak claim, and it's going to change over time as both bus electrified and as electric grid changes its sources of energy. Labor per passenger depends on how big a vehicle you have. And what matters is how big the vehicle you have are you going to run, because you're not the largest vehicle you have unless you have demand that. So corridors don't have enough demand to justify running vehicles most of the time. So it can get quite large. We have, of course, double-decker buses in Hong Kong before, and in the UK, and Germany. And there's no reason we couldn't be using these in the United States if we make a decision to do so, and they've been used in parts of the U.S. at times. So the key argument in the labor per passenger argument is weak, and if you want to get the your vehicle by cutting back on frequency, but that's counterproductive because that makes people less likely to use the system. Right. Now, this, of course, your system as well. I wasn't during the streetcar era, but I found a film that occurred during the period. It was made in the 1950s. Appropriate song. So here's a native. Is for the same going to this World's Fair. And so that they have the rides, visualization of how 5-minute song. You can play the rest of it in your mind. But a lot. So my sense is that the ride quality isn't all there. Now, modern than vintage, but of course this depends on maintenance and upkeep. And similar ride quality depends on you're running them on smooth roads or potholed roads. And you make this better or worse, and this depends on how much you're willing to invest. Okay, with a ride, it's more attractive to its users. Okay, quite pavement. Now, of course, you can put grass between the tracks and make it aesthetically appealing, but you can do the same thing with bus rapid transit if you have a separate core for them. So some examples before. It depends how you design the system, and you can design with a minimum of pavement if you're riders and you've got who are skilled at using these types of systems. Okay, now is an issue. Now, also a solvable problem. We don't need to spend tens of dollars to put traps in the ground so that people can figure out where they're going. We just need to spend enough to put up signs, lighting systems, and maps and things like that. This is the bus stop signs we have in Minneapolis. Now, this isn't just anywhere in Minneapolis. This is Washington City Hall. So this is pretty close to the center of the city. That sign's not terribly informative. Okay, it tells you stops there. If you're from Minneapolis, you'll also know that it's from the regional transit provider because you see the red P&L. But you don't know when the bus runs. You don't know things. But that can't build bus stop signs that are a little more informative in this example from this. For the information that can be made available. And this is in London, even at the, you have this kind of information. So when you go to London, you're not afraid to take the bus because you know that when you find a bus stop sign, you can figure how to get back to where you're going. It tells buses going in, it helps you figure out what side of the street you need to be waiting on. Simple would improve bus rapid transit systems, things similar. So that we should be able to provide that we have been provided today. Okay, routes that are stopped, we get to from the stop, the frequency of service, the range of hours of service, schedule, letting the bus down at night, let the light at the top of the bus up, and so on. There's the claims are more permanent, and the developers believe in their permanence and will make commitments. And then, of course, you ask if you're doing something, because this short move the Twin Cities car system, and you saw some slides from it before, starting the late growing Twin Cities were top 10 at this point in history. 1910 was one of the 10 largest metro areas in the U.S. Very quickly. Streetcars 1933, we start to appear in. And it all disappeared 54. I mean, the transit disappeared because those routes, it's not you, it's permanent, that's service. If you have demand in a corridor, the service will be what makes it permanent. And the service can be provided by street or buses or flying buses or whatever technology we have 40, 50, or 100 years from now. If you think about the term, buildings that will last decades, or service that will serve those buildings that will also last decades. The technology will last a short of time than the service itself. About cost versus of the technologies. It depends as well. In cities, we have two RTs, not ITBP would consider BRT, but that we in the Twin Cities would consider BRT. Line, which just opened this past year at a cost of about $12 million. It currently has 800 riders per day. I'd class it not terribly successful, and if you lost per passenger mile, it's quite high. We just in the North Star system, which is quite expensive. We have a proposed light rail system, which is coming more expensive than that. The green is under construction, which is going to connect down Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul, which is probably the best rail line that we're going to have in the region. Cost per daily passenger mile, spend the order of $4,600. blue, which runs from downtown Minneapolis to the America and the per daily passenger mile. And then there's a serial bus rapid transit system along Snelling Avenue, the A line, which is open up in a couple of years with a net cost per daily passenger mile of $1,800. Now, cost money. Some of these things cost a lot more, but if you compare the amount of money that you're spending with how much by the thing that you're actually, and if you do something that's less expensive, you can see more people. Whereas if you do something that's very expensive, that limits resources. There's issues. This is true throughout. Here are the forecasts, and get to the question of which forecast. It's claimed, for instance, that the Hiawatha light rail, the blue in the Twin Cities, is beating forecasts, which it's certainly beating its 1990 forecast in terms of average weekday boardings, but in its 1980s forecasts that were used to sell the line. So these are the arguments you get into. Which appropriate one to compare to? Well, it depends. Capital costs similarly came in much higher than were originally forecast, and somewhat higher than came in at the forecast that they did just before construction. Came in 110% of the cost of at the point the federal government made a guarantee that we built, but more expensive than the 1981 alternative analysis. Of course, it opened in 2004, over 20 years later. And then you can go on operating costs. It's often claimed that, well, sure, it has higher capital costs, but lower operating costs. The annual expenditures in those systems for capital and operating, it turns the average Twin Cities cost is annual on the order of $3.88 per passenger, while the has a cost of about $4.50 per passenger. Now, these aren't too far apart, but certainly not a home run for rail-based services. These are the schematic at the beginning of Stephanie's presentation. Stability, and this is an example. This is the map of Ottawa. So, center of the map, you can see Ottawa, which is of course the National Palace, or the government building there. In town, all lines are converging to a two pair, but they come away from downtown. They branch off, and so there's a number of branch routes that, when you're near, it doesn't matter which branch you take, but when you're going someplace that's far from downtown, it does matter which branch you're taking. Much higher concentration of service in the center than at the edge. And this is from a transportation perspective, but this is something you could only cost effectively do with buses. It's not something that you can effectively do there's one line in Ottawa as well. There have been proposals for more. There's proposals for a light rail tunnel under the central law. It's in various stages. Part of the problem is that they haven't committed enough real road space to the bus route transit system that they have. They should be making those roads exclusively for buses. Business in the center, they can be moved a few blocks off of the highest density line city. In the Twin Cities, in town, we have a project called Marquette and Avenues, where buses from the suburbs in the north-south come. They lane buses on each of those routes, going northbound, one going southbound. So there's 4 lanes for buses, as well as the Nicollet bus mall. So you can see pictures of Ottawa. You've seen pictures of lots of transit systems as well. A lot of BRT. Step of them. We have RT in the Twin Cities. That was along Avenue, which is on the northern stretch. The Mall of America on the southern part. It's an arterial, and people can transfer there to other buses or to the Blue Line RTA. Okay, we have a RT network. IP might have some problems with the usage of the RT for this, but it is being called BRT in an official document here. It's going to provide, but not in an exclusive right-of-way, but certain advantages, prepay number of other BRT invited to encourage ownership and make buses move a lot faster than they otherwise would. competing with car lines. So they're not going to have both BRT and streetcar. And so the question is, which of those technologies they're going to get. So for instance, on Lake Street, I'm fairly confident they're going to conclude to put a streetcar instead of bus rapid transit line, and they might make some buses as well. St. Paul 7th wants to put in a streetcar, while the Metropolitan Council wants to put in a bus rapid transit system. So tension between the modes here. The other bus system, the bus system in the state, which connects the Milazzo St. Paul campuses of the University of Minnesota on exclusive right-of-way with buses at 5 or better frequencies during the peak, with buses don't have to stop, cars have to stop when the bus is going across on the transitway at crossings. This is a corridor. It's a better bus rapid transit system than the red line. I had a student evaluate both of them across the ITDP criteria last semester as a paper, and a little bit higher. It has no payment because it's serving only students, but if you sort of assume that that implies payment, it satisfies the criteria to get a bronze level status. Think about is scale economy. So most cities have bus networks, trail lines. So buses are going to have a lot of people working on them behind the scenes, not just the driver people, mechanics, and people in the garages. They get parts, they're going to have expertise and so on that are going to keep them running. The system is going to be something that's very fragile because there's only going to be one line at first, and at most a couple lines. So parts are going to be harder to come by, expertise is going to be harder to come by. There's going to be a lot more outages, potentially, on networks than with, don't have the redundancy that you would with a larger system. Let me talk about a few of the transit-oriented development effects of BRT. I prefer the price effect. We can see whether it be or any type of transit system is successful if people are willing to pay more to be near it than farther from it. And there's studies looking at a lot of these systems that have gone peer review. So these are all peer-reviewed studies that have gone through various systems. So, for instance, in Pittsburgh, a property that's 1,000 feet away from the station is valued $1,000 less than property 100 feet away, all equal. Okay, so that's all that we talked about. And more results have been found in Bogota, Beijing, and in Seoul. Okay, so this are that people truly value the accessibility that's provided by the bus rapid transit systems. So I've looked at these for streetcars. Now, there's lots of studies for light rail transit, but for streetcars, and I haven't found any peer-reviewed studies for streetcars yet. And I want to sense of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence, but if people are something and they don't find it, you have to ask why. So systems have an advantage, nicer and ribbon cutting events, and like those. What is accessibility? So accessibility, look at the number that can be reached by a representative traveler across 51 largest U.S. metropolitan areas. Okay. We look at can be reached by in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, so on. By this, ran into he wasn't very happy with our rankings because Raleigh came out at 5th, and I sort of tried playing again. This isn't a question of how good your city is or anything. It's a question of how accessible your city is by automobile in this case. And cities that are near the top, and the important thing about them is they tend to be cities because they have high accessibility. You can reach lots of things in a short amount of time in a larger city than in a smaller city. Perfectly with ranking, so some relation ranking, some cities are more effective than others in their transportation network. Does reasonably well. We have a very fast network, and we also have a fairly dense downtown, although out. But if you're going to score lower on this because you can't reach it as much. What is it? Well, paying more to be there because people value accessibility. So how can you accessibility? Well, several different ways. You can make your transportation network faster. Improve the speed. You can make the system more direct. Reduce the circuity of the network. density of activity. So locating jobs near each other and locating jobs near workers and locating workers near jobs. All reach more things in less time, and that's what people are paying a premium to do. So for that, I will take questions. Thanks.
Steph,
Yes.
we've heard two presenters for today on our first ever video conference version of the RTA Trans Innovation Series. Not too bad, right? Okay, we wouldn't be able to have them for today without that. We'll have a little bit of time for any questions that there might be in the audience today. Well, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll repeat it back to them so they can hear it and do that so it's recorded properly. Before we do that, could we give our, I hope they'll be able to pick this up, we give a round of applause from North Carolina for our presenters. Minnesota and New York, I hope you heard that. There's a lot of appreciative people here in North Carolina that appreciate not just your time this afternoon, though operations in advance of that. Are there any questions here based on what you heard from either? Yes, sir. And that most recent presentation, it wasn't the first one, it's the one we just saw, is that right? Maybe. Okay.
You need to repeat the question.
Sure, do that. So Dave, is the gentleman here had a question about the cost per day passenger mile, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen back to you. Try to clear that.
Expand the full screen.
Okay, I still want him to be able to show that slide again.
Okay.
So David, I'm going to make you the presenter, and you can show that slide again on the cost per daily passenger mile.
So I'm now the presenter. I need to share the application
Pop back up there.
Okay, so
On the cost per daily passenger mile.
yeah, I assume.
Walk us through that one.
Each service, these are all from the Twin Cities. The problem is the capital of construction. And the second cost is daily ridership. Estimated if the line doesn't exist yet, or Apple in the case of the lines do exist, which would be the red line, the north, and the blue line. Trip length, so average mile of a particular trip on your route. Then cost per rider, so cost by the number of riders. This is arithmetic. And then for daily passenger mile, to multiply the number of riders by the miles that they're traveling to come up with sort of how much it's costing for the mile, where the daily passenger mile is important because longer trips might be valuable than shorter trips. One of the things that the system is just not just serving trips, serving of a particular length. One right performance metric for system probably comes the closest, as a network as a whole. By looking at a particular line, just giving an estimate of how to provide service to the people who are in that line or to the that have been carried, where a low number is better, meaning that you're carrying more people for less moments.
If I'm reading this right, the top number, the red line, on the line, $1,000.
Yeah, and what just kind of defend the red line. I mean, I think the best place. It was done for a lot of spatial equity, spatial geographic politics reasons. The rider, it just opened, so the ridership will go up over time. So if you done the ridership, you would have the cost per daily passenger mile. So this to be at 1,600, okay, which I still think is pretty small as you go, and the cost is very high. My trend would also say that the cost includes things that you may or may not want to attribute to the line, so that they put things in, for instance, some road improvements, some overpasses, some parking ramps, parking edges that are associated with the construction. So there's a subject to, always probably has to be kind of numbers. My point is that that number is relatively high for what's being served in that case. On the other hand, the arterial BRT system, which is a much more urban area of the Twin Cities, fast by any means because it's more signalized arterials, serve a lot more people for a lot less money. So the services matter. The design of the system is a lot, and it's not just we build a streetcar, we build a BRT, or we build a commuter rail, build an LRT. Imagine things happen. You put them in the right place. If you put them in the wrong place, you're going to be spending a lot of money and not getting very much benefit. And then to keep in mind, one of these is doing something that like BRT is there's flexibility, incrementalism associated with it. So for the corridor that you know gets a reasonable demand, you can improve that demand still further. The people who are better off because they can now go faster. You can get a lot for your buck by doing that than building something out in greenfield. Line is not a big greenfield, but it's moving out to low density suburbs, and it's mostly parking types of passengers, people who would be walking to transit. So it's a very suburban, almost an ex-urban line at the end. The line has got a lot of the same problems.
I'd love to just say that, and to close the loop on this one, to be very clear, what you're doing here in terms of cost per rider and daily passenger mile, the operating cost, that's a way of comparing capital costs. Is that right?
Capital cost comparison, yeah.
Okay, to be clear. Right. Right. It's a comparison of capital cost. It's not an operating cost. I want to make sure that was the key point there. Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. Are there other questions? There was another question over here. Am I right? Just to clarify that one. Any other questions? Questions for Stephanie as well. Sean.
Very low. If anyone that has done deeper the here, if I hear a number of classes,
Right.
But I'm looking at the path over along Earl Road, Durham.
Right.
If there are any on development was the private service of that that might have been associated with and how much was just the fact that the people was always there. We just understand that.
Okay. Let me ask that. So, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm not sure if you heard the question, giving you sharing privileges if you want to show a particular slide, but the question from here was the specific example of Cleveland, which was the top example in your more development for your transit dollar presentation or report. The type of development was over $5 billion in development. The question, how much of that, if you've been able to determine or stratify, how much of that was private sector development, how much of that might have been more government and institutional that might have happened regardless of that particular investment because it was already in the pipeline? Do you have any sense of that at all?
Didn't really separate out private sector development and institutional development. We got most of our development numbers from the cities themselves, from the economic development departments or the redevelopment agencies. I don't really have that kind of stratification in investment numbers. But I think that, at least in the case of Cleveland, we know that most of what happened was not already in the pipeline because if you're familiar with Cleveland, it's a former industrial city, and the land is actually, or was, quite contaminated and needing to be cleaned up before any kind of development happened in a specific corridor. So we're pretty confident in attributing the development that happened in that corridor to the time that the BRT happened. I mean, you can't necessarily say that Cleveland Clinic wouldn't have expanded or whatever, but we can say, and they can say, that they chose to stay in the health tech corridor as opposed to going to other locations because of the access that the transit provided.
That's good. Oh, there we put the road at 451 Eastern Side. Okay. In fact, the entire presentation with them speaking will be associated with that. Let me go ahead and do this very quick there, Michael, as well. Let's see if I can pop down here. Next, give everybody a sense of what's happening next. The series is going to continue. Our next session will be here on January 30th. We're going to have in-person presentations by, coincidentally, the CEO and General Manager of the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, the one that offers the Helpline, which you just heard from talking about that. That's the one that was ranked highest in the United States. Joe Iacobucci, who works for Chicago Transit, Stephanie actually mentioned that project earlier, is one of the things they're looking at in Chicago to create some new bus rapid transit. Both those folks will be here in person. Future presentations are coming up here. Ways and system approaches in February. That's going to be a combination video conference and in person. We'll have two from the United States in person. We'll have one from Europe. These we're not flying them in, but we'll be delighted to have them go in with the video conference. Arterial treatments and then circular innovations in the last mile. They'll be coming, and there may be more to go as a result or in addition to these. But hopefully these will help. First session that we had back in November, which was great. By the transit, the video from that is now on our website. If you go to getmoving.org/transit series schedule, you can download the video or a link to the videos from there. They're also on our YouTube channel. And then go to letsgetmoving.org transit series. You can see the information on all of this. So, and again, you can see the additional links there along with information about bus rapid transit in general, which is one of the items that this series covers. Just before 5 in the East, a little bit before 4 in Minnesota time. So if we can give one more round of applause for our presenter. Do it loud. And if you do have additional questions, you could tweet them. You can see the link there as well. You could also email myself or email Natalie. And we'll be happy to forward those to the presenter. I enjoyed working with them and for their preparations for this. They're committed to trying to get good information. Everybody helps me to make the decision. And thank you for coming today. Thank you. Yep.
Thanks, David.